Let's close by discussing a path towards an improved Medicare for all. You just outlined an industry that makes money by denying care. That shareholders for these companies make money when people die. I mean, that some people think I'm being hyperbolic when I say that, but
you're right. You're absolutely right.
That one of the most frustrating conversations I've had lately is with, I won't out a very close family member of mine who holds a high position in unions. And his hesitation about Medicare for all is summarized in the following way. He has fought for decades to give his union members, a kind of Cadillac, his words, Cadillac
right.
healthcare plan. And
right.
They sacrificed wages, they've sacrificed pensions, they've sacrificed job security, sacrificed a lot of things to get that. How can he take that case to his members and say they're going to be thinking my taxes are going to go up and my health care, really their health insurance, not health care, they're different things, is going to go away. What's the case for that crowd for an improved Medicare for all?
You can get higher wages if we let everybody see a doctor. There's a difference between treating healthcare and medical care and treatment and medicine like a yacht versus like the fire department. If your house is on fire, you don't have to check your bank account before you call the fire department. The fire department goes where they're needed, not where people pay them, because we want fires to be put out when they're needed. That's a public good. Public health is a public good, particularly during a pandemic.
Yeah.
And I'll hit this from a couple of different areas. First, I'll get to health outcomes before I get to the specific case for union members.
Okay.
And just to, maybe one piece to reflect on your characterization of the health insurance industry, it's a healthcare denial racket. That's what the health insurance industry is, to your point.
Yeah.
And it's a cartel. It has cartel pricing dynamics because it has artificial government support. The point I'd want to make, particularly about to the union members, is that if you let everybody establish an access to healthcare as a matter of right, it then frees up your bargaining power that you've traded for these Cadillac plans to then get better wages and better job security and fewer hours and more workplace protections. Labor has been forced to squander its bargaining power on a basic human right that our government has refused to acknowledge. There's a whole further piece here, which is that Medicare for all will be the biggest job stimulus opportunity of any industrial policy we could imagine, because it will immediately remove from the expense statements of every major corporation one of their biggest expenses. For Detroit auto manufacturers, their biggest expense is employee healthcare, not steel for the cars. And when we take those costs and, like every other country in the world, put them on the government, it will enable businesses in every sector to consider a hiring boom. That's going to be good for labor. I think there's a huge opportunity here to recognize that our dedication to for-profit healthcare hasn't only undermined human rights, and it hasn't only driven homelessness, and it hasn't only kept entirely too many Americans awake at night when they should be sleeping trying to recover from their illnesses. It also inhibits job creation. It undermines our economy. It limits people's prospects. It forces their decisions about where to live and how to live, because healthcare is an existential need, especially for people with chronic conditions. And it shouldn't be a locus of coercion. That's the reality today, is that healthcare is coercive because people make concessions in their life choices in order to get it. But nobody should have to do that. Nobody in other countries has to do that. How can we walk around talking about living in a land of the free when we don't even have the most basic human right that people in other industrialized countries have long enjoyed? And the last way I'd put this is that to be dedicated to that for-profit predatory healthcare paradigm before the global pandemic of the coronavirus, it was brutal and it was vicious then. I'll tell a quick story. A supporter of mine, a physician here at the University of California, San Francisco, spoke to me about the spend down to Medicaid, which any chronically ill patient undergoes. And every physician who deals in palliative care or in other specialties that deal with people who recovering or dealing with chronic illnesses or terminal illnesses recognizes this dynamic of people being bled dry of every penny they've ever earned. 40% of cancer patients lose their life savings within the first year.
Yeah.
And the spend down to Medicaid ends up with sick people in the street. That's our idea of healthcare, is take sick people, treat their illness as an excuse for extraction, bleed them dry of every cent they've ever made, and then when we're done squeezing them dry of anything that they can be used to make profit for, kick them into the street and forget about them. That's our established policy, and it's not humane.
Right.
It's not acceptable. It's not American, and it's not tolerable. And I'm here to make sure that we do better. And in the middle of a pandemic, it's not just brutal and vicious. It's stupid. It is senselessly stupid, because if we don't let people get care or medicine, it means we are creating unnecessary vectors, risks to public health. We are living in the middle of a contagious global pandemic. We should act like it. And one of the things that means is make sure that cost is not a barrier to care. It remains that way for too many people. And again, that was vicious before. It's idiotic now, idiotic for our civilization. And I would rather have Congress make sane, rational, defensible decisions than idiotic ones.
Finally, your opponent, Nancy Pelosi, took a pretty big risk in the language she used to endorse Joe Kennedy. We're taping today is September 1st, election day here in Massachusetts, where Ed Markey is expected to win if the polls hold. But Nancy Pelosi called for a youth movement. We said we needed a youth movement. It sounded to me like the audio for your next TV commercial.
I appreciate that. Yeah, she's absolutely right. We need some fresh voices in Congress. And I think the very first one we need to remove is an incumbent who served for 33 years without ever debating anyone. And I think the idea that someone can serve, I'm using serve in air quotes right now, serve in Congress for a generation, an entire generation, without ever being called on to defend their ideas in public. And just to be clear, when she talks at press conferences, she doesn't do that. That's not a defense against an actual interlocutor. And I think the reason she won't show up for a debate is that she and her entire team knows that if they do, she'll lose the seat, because our platform hews more closely to this proud district's sensibilities. This is not a city that supports relentless wars for profit, which she has. This is not a city that supports predatory for-profit extractive healthcare. She has. This is not a city that supports vicious deportations and border militarizations and concentration camps on our borders, which she has funded. Her record in office has very little relationship to the public construction of her figure. And that's why I'm running for office, because I pay too much attention to be fooled by corporate news. And at the end of the day, if there's a debate in the city and San Francisco has an opportunity to hear the choices before us this November, it's the first time in 33 years that there's been another Democrat on the ballot. And if my city understands the choices before us, I'm very confident that I'll be our next representative in Congress. Well, and I'm looking forward to it.
I hope you get the opportunity to debate. She has a lot of incentive, obviously, not to. Folks, that's our show for today. Shahid Buttar is on the ballot in California's 12th district, but it's a race with national implications. And I'm really grateful to reconnect with you, Shahid. Thanks for coming on the program.
It's my pleasure, Dennis. It's great to see you again, and so glad to reconnect with you as well. Thanks for having me on.
All right, peace.
Peace, brother.